Imagine thinking you found the perfect husband, only for him to murder you out of greed, believing he could inherit your fortune, only to have that same greed land him in jail for life. This story delves into the dark side of ambition, where love becomes a tool, trust is shattered, and manipulation leads to irreversible tragedy. It's a haunting reminder that greed, unchecked, often destroys the very people it consumes. Before we unravel this gripping tale of love, greed, and betrayal, don't forget to like and subscribe to True Crime Files, HQ for more chilling stories that expose the darkest corners of human behavior. David Matthews, a smooth-talking drifter with an uncanny ability to adapt and manipulate, first met Kendra Ellis at a downtown Miami lounge. She was nursing a martini, her sharp eyes scanning the room for opportunity. Kendra, at 28, was a woman of ambition, but her career as Eleanor Hartley's trusted personal assistant was more of a gilded cage than a golden ticket. She was privy to Eleanor's empire but bound by her employer's dominating presence, unable to leverage the wealth she was constantly surrounded by. David, recognizing Kendra's dissatisfaction, struck up a conversation that quickly evolved into a partnership born of shared discontent. He saw Kendra's intelligence and resourcefulness as assets, while she saw his charm and fearlessness as the perfect tools to finally claim what she believed she deserved. Over the course of a few months, their relationship turned from casual to conspiratorial. Late-night talks in dimly lit apartments became strategy sessions, where they plotted how to infiltrate Eleanor Hartley's carefully guarded world. Eleanor Hartley was the epitome of power. At 69, she commanded the South Florida real estate market with an iron fist, her success overshadowing anyone in her path. Eleanor's reputation was one of brilliance and cunning, with a presence that intimidated even her closest associates. She was revered and feared in equal measure, but her personal life was a fortress. Widowed and estranged from her only son, Jason, Eleanor's vulnerability lay in her search for companionship, a weakness Kendra was intimately aware of. Kendra used her position as Eleanor's assistant to gather crucial details about her routines, preferences, and vulnerabilities. She knew Eleanor's favorite wines, the books she adored, and the stories that made her eyes light up. Kendra fed these details to David, who studied them with the precision of a chess master. When the time was right, David orchestrated a chance meeting with Eleanor at a gallery opening Kendra ensured she would attend. He appeared to be everything Eleanor admired, cultured, attentive, and subtly romantic. Eleanor was captivated by David's charm. She hadn't felt so seen or appreciated in years, and David knew exactly how to reinforce that feeling. He quoted her favorite authors, remembered the smallest details of her stories, and seemed genuinely interested in her world. Their courtship moved quickly, with Kendra working behind the scenes to ensure nothing was left to chance. Every detail of their relationship was orchestrated, from the surprise dinners to the carefully timed compliments. David Matthews's calculated romance with Eleanor Hartley was nearing its pinnacle. Armed with the insider knowledge Kendra Ellis had provided, he had seamlessly integrated himself into Eleanor's life. After months of carefully curated dates, heartfelt gestures, and perfectly timed compliments, Eleanor was captivated. The man she believed had entered her life by chance now felt like her greatest blessing. The proposal was a carefully staged event. On a breezy night under the glow of the Miami skyline, David knelt on one knee, presenting Eleanor with an elegant diamond ring, a design Kendra had meticulously chosen for its simplicity and timeless appeal. Eleanor, swept up in the romance and the prospect of a future no longer defined by loneliness, said yes, her voice trembling with joy. David wore a triumphant smile, but behind it lay the quiet satisfaction of a plan unfolding flawlessly. The wedding was nothing short of spectacular. Held at Eleanor's sprawling Palm Beach estate, it was an affair of unmatched opulence. High-profile guests mingled in the carefully manicured gardens as a string quartet played in the background. Eleanor, radiant in her custom gown, seemed to glow with newfound happiness as she walked down the aisle. David, the picture of devotion, waited at the altar with practiced sincerity. Kendra, watching from the sidelines as Eleanor's assistant, concealed her own satisfaction. Every detail of the wedding had been curated with the same precision as their scheme. David was now officially in Eleanor's life, and, they believed, on the verge of being named sole heir to her considerable fortune. After the wedding, David moved into Eleanor's estate, fully assuming his role as her husband. He attended charity galas, mingled with Eleanor's influential circle, and played the part of the devoted spouse with ease. Behind the scenes, he and Kendra remained in constant communication, confident that Eleanor would soon amend her will in his favor. To David, it was only a matter of time before he secured the fortune he and Kendra had meticulously plotted to obtain. David was unaware of Eleanor's estranged son, Jason. Eleanor had mentioned him only briefly in their early conversations, brushing off their fractured relationship as ancient history. To David, Eleanor was a lonely widow without close family, perfectly positioned to leave her vast fortune to him. He was certain her growing affection for him would lead her to make him the sole beneficiary of her estate. Unbeknownst to David, Eleanor had begun to re-establish contact with Jason, her estranged son. Their conversations were tentative at first, full of apologies and guarded words. But as the weeks passed, Eleanor found herself yearning to reconnect with him. She had kept her meetings with Jason private, knowing it was a deeply personal matter she wasn't ready to share. Eleanor Hartley's life had been marked by ambition and success, but her greatest failure, she believed, was her estranged relationship with her only child, Jason Hartley. Years earlier, a heated family dispute over Jason's career choices had driven a wedge between them. Jason, defying Eleanor's wishes to join the family's real estate empire, had chosen a quieter life as an artist. The conflict escalated into a bitter falling out, and the two had barely spoken since. Eleanor, consumed by her work, had buried the pain of the rift beneath layers of busyness and distractions. But something about her recent marriage to David Matthews stirred feelings of nostalgia and regret. Perhaps it was the fleeting moments when she would catch herself reminiscing about Jason as a child, or the quiet loneliness that had settled into her life before David's arrival. Whatever the reason, Eleanor decided it was time to reach out. One afternoon, under the guise of a casual outing, Eleanor drove to a small gallery in a neighboring town where Jason's latest works were being exhibited. She stood quietly, studying a painting of a serene countryside, when a familiar voice broke the silence. "Mom." Jason's tone was cautious, disbelieving. Eleanor turned to face him, her expression a mix of relief and vulnerability. "Hello, Jason," she said softly. What followed was a tentative conversation, full of apologies and unspoken emotions. Jason, though hesitant, agreed to meet her again. Slowly, over a series of quiet lunches and walks, the estranged mother and son began to mend their fractured relationship. For Eleanor, reconnecting with Jason brought a sense of healing she hadn't felt in years. She didn't tell anyone about their reconciliation, not even David. Their relationship still felt fragile, and she wanted to nurture it in private. Jason, too, was wary of this new dynamic, unsure if it was truly the beginning of a lasting bond or simply a fleeting attempt to make amends. Amid these reconnections, Eleanor began to feel a growing unease about David. His charm, once intoxicating, now felt calculated. Small inconsistencies in his behavior nagged at her, like the way his smile would falter when he thought she wasn't looking or how he showed little genuine interest in her past or passions. Though she couldn't yet pinpoint what was wrong, the reunion with Jason made her acutely aware of the importance of protecting her legacy. A week before her murder, Eleanor took a decisive step. She visited her attorney, unannounced, carrying a folder of documents that outlined her intentions. In the privacy of the attorney's office, she rewrote her will. This time, she left everything. Her sprawling real estate empire, her art collections, her properties, and her financial assets, to Jason. The decision felt right, even if it was bittersweet. Eleanor's fortune was the result of her life's work, but Jason was her blood, her family. She believed this choice could cement their newfound reconciliation. Eleanor instructed her attorney to keep the changes confidential, knowing how sensitive the matter was. She left the office that day with a quiet sense of resolution, never imagining how crucial this decision would become in the days to come. Meanwhile, David and Kendra continued their charade, confident that Eleanor's wealth would soon belong to them. They had no idea that the foundation of their plan had already crumbled. For David, the thought of Eleanor's will never crossed his mind. He was sure she would leave everything to him. Kendra, too, believed their scheme was progressing smoothly. The two were utterly unaware that Jason was now the sole heir to Eleanor's fortune, a change that would soon have devastating consequences for them all. As the final phase of their sinister plan approached, Kendra Ellis worked meticulously behind the scenes, orchestrating every detail to ensure nothing went wrong. Her years of working as Eleanor's personal assistant had given her intimate knowledge of the Hartley mansion and its operations, and she used that information to craft a seamless cover for David's impending crime. The night was carefully chosen, a quiet evening when Eleanor's household staff had been dismissed early under the pretext of Eleanor wanting some solitude. Kendra had subtly suggested it during her last conversation with Eleanor, knowing the wealthy mogul often welcomed moments of quiet reflection. She also arranged for the security system to be temporarily disabled, citing a scheduled maintenance that she claimed was long overdue. It was a subtle but crucial move to ensure David wouldn't be detected. Meanwhile, Kendra provided David with a carefully crafted alibi. He was to attend a late dinner with a group of Eleanor's associates at a high-end restaurant downtown. The reservation, the guest list, and even the timing had all been handled by Kendra. His absence from the mansion during the critical moments was essential to the plan, allowing him to reappear just in time to stage his return as a concerned husband. David, however, was growing restless. The weeks leading up to this night had tested his patience, and Eleanor's newfound warmth and frequent absences had unnerved him. She seemed more distant, more guarded, and her behaviors hinted at a secret he couldn't quite decipher. Despite his suspicions, David remained resolute, convinced that the fortune he believed he was entitled to was within his grasp. That evening, as the dinner party concluded, David excused himself, citing a sudden headache. He returned to the mansion, where Eleanor, dressed in an elegant silk robe, was descending the grand staircase. She paused upon seeing him, her expression wary. "You're back early," she said, her voice calm but tinged with suspicion. "We need to talk," David replied, his tone sharp, rehearsed for what was to come. The argument began under the pretense of marital discord. David accused Eleanor of being cold, of shutting him out, of prioritizing everything else over their marriage. Eleanor, unflinching, met his accusations with the poised composure of a woman who had built her life on strength and resilience. "I've given you everything," she said, her voice steady. "If you feel like that isn't enough, maybe you should look in the mirror." But David's agitation grew, his words laced with venom as he edged closer to her. Eleanor, sensing the escalation, stood her ground but instinctively stepped back toward the staircase. The moment was charged with tension as David's fury reached its peak. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he spat, his voice rising. "You think you can control everyone, but you can't control me." The next moment was a blur. David, overcome by rage, lunged at Eleanor. His push was forceful enough to send her staggering backward. Her slippered feet slipped on the polished steps, and she tumbled down the staircase in a series of sickening thuds. She landed at the bottom, her body twisted unnaturally, her head resting against the cold marble floor. For a moment, the house was silent except for David's ragged breathing. He descended the stairs slowly, his mind racing. The sight of Eleanor's lifeless body filled him with an unsettling mix of fear and exhilaration. It was done. The wealth, he thought, was finally his. David quickly set to work staging the scene. He placed a tipped vase near Eleanor's body and scattered papers across the floor, mimicking the signs of a frantic fall. He then dialed 911, feigning panic as he reported the tragic accident. When the paramedics arrived, David played the part of a distraught husband flawlessly, his tears convincing, his grief believable. But what David didn't know was that Eleanor's newly amended will had already been filed with her attorney, leaving him entirely out of her fortune. The lies that he and Kendra had so carefully constructed were about to crumble spectacularly. The days following Eleanor Hartley's death were a whirlwind of public mourning and private turmoil. David Matthews played the role of the grieving husband with perfection, appearing at memorial events and offering carefully curated statements to the press about the profound loss of his beloved wife. Kendra Ellis remained behind the scenes, just as they had planned, avoiding unnecessary attention and awaiting the wealth they both believed was within their grasp. However, their delusions of victory began to crumble the moment Eleanor's attorney, a composed and meticulous woman named Patricia Monroe, summoned the key parties for the reading of the will. The gathering was held in the austere conference room of Eleanor's legal firm, its walls adorned with awards that spoke to the late Mogul's legacy. David arrived, exuding confidence, while Kendra stayed at a distance, her nerves hidden behind a practiced calm. Patricia's voice was steady as she began to read the document, outlining Eleanor's philanthropic donations and minor bequests to loyal staff members. David listened impatiently, his mind already fantasizing about the extravagant lifestyle he and Kendra would soon enjoy. But then, Patricia's tone shifted, signaling the pivotal moment. Regarding the distribution of the estate, Patricia read, Eleanor Hartley has chosen to leave her entire fortune, including all properties, assets, and business holdings, to her son, Jason Hartley. The room fell into a stunned silence. David's face drained of color, his composure faltering as the weight of Patricia's words sank in. Kendra, seated inconspicuously at the back, gripped the armrest of her chair, her carefully constructed plans unraveling before her eyes. This must be a mistake, David finally stammered, his voice cracking. Eleanor never mentioned, she never. Patricia's expression remained stoic. This is Eleanor's final will and testament, filed and notarized a week before her passing. There is no mistake. Before David could respond, Jason Hartley's presence made itself known. Tall and imposing, Jason had been silent until now, his sharp gaze fixed on David. How convenient, Jason said coolly, that my mother died just days after revising her will. Don't you think, David? David tried to muster a response, but the implication in Jason's words left him floundering. Kendra shifted uncomfortably, her mind racing to formulate a contingency plan. Jason wasn't finished. I haven't seen my mother in years, but we'd recently reconciled. She told me things, David, about her doubts, about you. And now she's gone. I'm not buying this accident story. The words landed like a blow, and for the first time, David felt his carefully built facade cracking. Jason's suspicion was palpable, and his intent clear, he wasn't going to let Eleanor's death go unquestioned. True to his word, Jason demanded a full investigation. His connections within law enforcement ensured that no detail would go unexamined. The circumstances of Eleanor's death, initially dismissed as a tragic accident, were about to face intense scrutiny. For David and Kendra, the dream of wealth and freedom was rapidly morphing into a nightmare. The investigation into Eleanor Hartley's death began quietly but gained momentum as Jason Hartley's insistence on a thorough examination brought skilled detectives to the case. What initially appeared to be an accidental fall down the grand staircase of the Hartley mansion began unraveling under closer scrutiny, exposing layers of deception. Detectives started by examining the mansion's surveillance system. Eleanor's state-of-the-art security network, designed to ensure her safety, had been inexplicably offline on the day of her death. When questioned, Kendra Ellis, Eleanor's personal assistant, explained that she had disabled the system for routine maintenance. Her explanation seemed plausible on the surface, but a deeper dive into the system logs revealed discrepancies. The maintenance records showed no scheduled updates, and the abrupt shutdown occurred only hours before Eleanor's death. This inconsistency turned the investigators' attention squarely on Kendra. Detectives began piecing together her movements on the day of the incident. Eleanor's household staff, loyal employees who had worked with her for years, were questioned about their absence. They revealed a critical detail: Kendra had given them the day off, citing Eleanor's need for quiet due to a personal matter. The staff's testimony painted a suspicious picture. Why would Kendra dismiss them on a day when Eleanor, a woman known for her meticulous schedule, would typically rely on her team? This detail, coupled with the disabled surveillance system, raised red flags. Confronted with these inconsistencies, Kendra's polished demeanor began to crack. She insisted that she had acted in Eleanor's best interest, but her answers grew increasingly defensive under the detective's relentless questioning. As investigators pushed further, Kendra's story began to falter. Feeling the pressure, she shifted the blame to David. She revealed that David had been the one to insist on Eleanor's isolation that day, claiming it was part of a plan to surprise her with a romantic gesture. Kendra painted herself as an unwitting participant, describing David as manipulative and dangerous. The revelation turned the spotlight onto David Matthews. His alibi, previously unquestioned, now came under scrutiny. David had claimed he was out running errands at the time of Eleanor's death, but when detectives reviewed surveillance footage from nearby locations, no sign of David could be found. Additionally, receipts and timestamps provided by David were inconsistent, raising further doubts about his whereabouts. As the questioning intensified, David and Kendra's once united front began to crumble. David, realizing that Kendra had implicated him, fired back during his interrogation, accusing her of masterminding the entire scheme. He described Kendra as a cunning manipulator who had orchestrated Eleanor's death to secure the inheritance. Kendra, in turn, accused David of using her loyalty against her, claiming she had no knowledge of his violent intentions. The unraveling of their alliance provided detectives with the evidence they needed to move forward. The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place: Kendra's suspicious behavior, the disabled security system, the dismissed staff, and David's shaky alibi. Each detail painted a damning picture of premeditated murder. Jason Hartley, observing the investigation unfold, felt a grim sense of validation. His instincts about the circumstances surrounding his mother's death had been correct. The investigation was far from over, but the walls were closing in on David and Kendra, their meticulously crafted plan collapsing under the weight of their lies. What had begun as a scheme for wealth and power was rapidly transforming into a tale of betrayal and downfall. Following their confessions during the intense interrogation, David Matthews and Kendra Ellis were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The shocking unraveling of their plan made headlines, casting the trial as one of the most sensational legal battles the city had seen in years. The once charismatic David and his cunning accomplice Kendra now faced the grim prospect of justice. The courtroom was packed when the trial began, the air thick with tension. Prosecutors presented a compelling case, laying out the overwhelming evidence against both defendants. The disabled security system, the conveniently absent household staff, and the burner phone communications between David and Kendra painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. Surveillance footage, forensic evidence, and digital logs from Eleanor's estate further cemented their guilt. The prosecution zeroed in on Kendra's insider knowledge, showing how she had used her position as Eleanor's trusted personal assistant to orchestrate every aspect of the plan. From providing David with key details about Eleanor's daily routine to ensuring the staff was away on the day of the murder, Kendra's role as the mastermind was undeniable. However, they argued, David's motive was equally damning: his relentless greed and desire to secure Eleanor's fortune drove him to carry out the brutal act. Jason Hartley's testimony became a turning point in the trial. He described his mother's recent reconciliation with him, highlighting how she had decided to leave her entire fortune to him as a gesture of rebuilding their relationship. Jason's heartfelt account of Eleanor's joy at reconnecting with her son struck a chord with the jury. The revelation of Eleanor's rewritten will added a poignant layer to the case, underscoring the futility of David and Kendra's actions. The defense attempted to deflect blame, with each defendant trying to minimize their role in the crime. David's attorneys portrayed him as a pawn manipulated by Kendra, while Kendra's defense argued that she had no control over David's violent actions. However, Their conflicting narratives only reinforced the prosecution's case, highlighting their shared culpability. In the end, the jury delivered a swift and decisive verdict. David Matthews was convicted of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. The judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole, emphasizing the calculated nature of his actions and the brutal violence he inflicted on Eleanor. Kendra Ellis, though convicted of the same charges, received a slightly lesser sentence due to her role as an accessory rather than the one who directly carried out the murder. She was sentenced to 35 years in prison without the possibility of parole, her betrayal of Eleanor's trust weighing heavily in the court's decision. As the sentences were read, the courtroom was silent except for the sound of Jason Hartley's quiet sobs. Justice had been served, but the cost was immeasurable. Eleanor Hartley's life had been stolen, and her legacy was marred by the greed and betrayal of those she had welcomed into her home. The trial concluded with a sobering reminder of the devastating consequences of ambition unchecked by morality. This story is a grim reminder of the destructive power of greed and manipulation. Eleanor Hartley's instincts and enduring legacy outsmarted the very people who sought to destroy her, leaving behind a powerful testament to resilience and foresight. The tragic loss of her life and the unrelenting pursuit of justice by her son, Jason, highlight the thin line between trust and betrayal. It raises haunting questions. Would Jason have been able to save his mother if their reconciliation had happened sooner? And what drives people to such lengths for wealth and power, sacrificing morality and humanity in the process? If this story of greed, betrayal, and poetic justice left you speechless, like and subscribe to True Crime Files, HQ for more gripping tales that explore the darkest corners of human behavior.